Welcome. My name is Steve Gauk. I'm the Regional Agronomy Manager for the Eastern Region for Beck's Hybrids. And today we're going to talk a little bit about in-season decision making. And I'm really excited actually to talk about this topic because many of you have followed Beck's practical farm research and our PFR studies and know that we test a lot of products and test a lot of practices, and we do the best we can up front planting and in our spring applications, but Mother Nature always throws us some curveballs. And then we kind of sit there in season and go, well, now what should we do? I have this scenario, but I don't know what to do. Well, one thing we're moving to in part of PFR is PFR studies on in-season decision making. So we have a scenario now. What should we do about it? So these are all kind of first-year studies that we're taking a look at. We're going to expand these as time goes on, but I'm excited to share with you what we've learned. So we're going to start off here with thin stand management and nitrogen in corn. So it's a situation where I've got a stand that's not perfect. I don't know what to do yet, and should I apply more nitrogen? Should I apply less? How should I handle that? So let's take a look at what we did. First, we took a meter here, and you can see we randomly plugged some holes. We wanted to create a situation where we have a sporadic stand, and this is what we got. So many of you look at that cornfield and you go, yeah, I've been in that scenario. I've had those gaps. I've had those skips. I've been in a spot where I've said, well, there's enough plants there. I don't know if I should replant or not. I think I'm going to leave it, but what do I do now? Or it's too late to replant, and I've got that scenario. So we wanted to take a look, create that scenario, and then say, okay, what should I do about nitrogen? So now this is a busy slide, but what I really wanted to point out to you here is we've got high response nitrogen hybrids and more of our nitrogen efficient hybrids. So we can compare the two. Is there a difference? And you jump over here and we're looking at control was 190 units of nitrogen. That's PFR proven practice for units of nitrogen. Then we backed off to 150. Where does that fall? Well, at 32,000 spacing, okay, the 150 didn't work. We still made more money using our full rate on our nitrogen or our high response hybrids. But we jumped down at the bottom here in our nitrogen efficient, it didn't change much based on our spacing or our nitrogen use, which I thought was kind of interesting. So to kind of simplify that, we look at this chart. 32,000 normal spacing still pays to go with our normal nitrogen plan. 26,000 with very sporadic spacing, still a slight advantage to maximizing that yield in those nitrogen applications. We jump all the way here to the right, 20,000 sporadic spacing. Now we see a little bit of a shift to that 150 units of nitrogen. We know we've lost a little bit of yield there. We actually see kind of more of that response maybe in our higher yield, high response hybrids, where our more nitrogen efficient ones, pretty even from that standpoint. But here's where we start coming up with our thought process at 20,000. Hey, maybe now's the time to start backing off. Again, this is 1 year data, but it's multi-location. We're going to continue to look at it and see what trends come out of it. Next, we're going to move into the same scenario. I've got this thin stand. Should I be applying fungicide? So again, we looked at a couple different hybrids, one more susceptible to disease than the other one, and tried to come up with, all right, what's our plan? We sprayed with Trivapro, which is a PFR proven fungicide, and you'll see all the way down the board, it paid. Now, granted, we're looking at Kentucky and Southern Illinois. We had a late southern rust outbreak there, which probably enhanced these dollars. But our hybrids that are more susceptible to disease, you'll see a bigger payout. So again, we simplified this. Huge advantage all the way across. But what I want to jump down here to is the 20,000 sporadic spacing. Almost a $50 increase in profitability by putting that fungicide on. So even in a scenario where you have a thin stand, we have disease pressure starting to creep in, there's an advantage to trying to maximize our yield and our return by putting fungicide on at low populations. Here you can kind of see the treated versus the untreated at the end of the day. Big difference there. Like I said, that southern rust came in a little bit late. It can take a lot of yield off if we get heavy enough pressures. Now we're going to move on to soybeans. So replant threshold in soybeans. This really seems like the million-dollar question. Every year we're standing in bean fields going, what should I do? Should I replant? Should I not? How should I replant? So we decided to take a look at that. Now when your seed advisor and your dealer shows up at the farm, they probably got a list of questions here they're going to ask you. One is, what was the original planting date? Next one's probably, what's your current plant stand? Have you taken some stand counts? Where are you at? Next question we usually ask, how uniform is that stand? And that really had a big basis in the past of, well, if it's a uniform stand, I'm more apt to leave it than if it's a sporadic stand. So we needed to test that theory in PFR too. Then the last question everybody asks, should I tear it up or do I just fill in? So we're taking a look at that. Now here's what we've based a lot of our decisions on in the past. This is Purdue data, and for the most part it's been pretty close. We look at this and say, okay, if I have a population of 60,000 drilled beans, I'm at 92% of normal yields. And that's played out for the most part in a lot of cases. But this data's been out for a few years. Do new genetics change that? Next, we've got to be able to answer these agronomic questions. What kind of condition are the plants in and will they survive? With the seed treatments like our SDS Plus on soybeans now, we're seeing a lot more plants survive tough situations. So we got to be aware of what kind of conditions each plant is in. Is it broken off below the cotyledons? Okay? Are the cotyledons missing? Is it bruised? Things like that. We've got to know and understand the structure of that plant, because in picture one, where that's broken that neck, it's below the cotyledons, it's not going to survive. But in picture number two, the cotyledons are gone, but you see new growth coming out, chances are pretty good that plant will survive. Next, we take a look at PFR data. Multi-year, multi-location, most of you know this is PFR proven. To plant your soybeans early, we know there's a huge advantage to planting early. We also know there's an advantage to actually lowering populations when we plant early. Well, does that play out into a replant situation? Hey, I planted early, but I got a thinner population. Am I still better off than replanting later and thicker? Next, we also take a look here at supplementing in. This is some more Purdue data we take a look at here. And they did this study a few years ago. You'll see they had 200,000 out there, and then they had a plot with 66,000. And what's interesting, then they took a 30-inch row planter in this drilled field, and they went back in and just filled in. And they filled in with some black soybeans so they could actually tell where did the yield come from. So you'll see here at the 66,000 plus the 120, two different colored green bars. The lighter green color is the added in. We didn't gain much yield. We didn't actually even get better than the original 66,000 by spotting in with a 30-inch row planter. Now we also took here at the far right the 66,000 and just started over and replanted it at 200. We didn't even get back to the original 66 either. So these are things we're looking at in PFR. Are these still true and how do they play out? Now here's some pictures from our studies. 15-inch rows, we got a replant dates of May 26th through June 3rd. This is multi-location, that's why there's extra dates. So the picture on the left, you'll see we tore the field up, started over, planted 150,000. Now we came back here and we're looking at our original planting dates of April 21st through May 13th. Here's a 40,000 stand. Most of us couldn't really stomach that, right? We couldn't look at that and go, I don't know, I don't think I can keep that. That'd be tough, right? But here we're comparing two different scenarios. Here's where we look at that 150 replanted versus 80,000. In the past, we've always said, hey, 80,000, if it's uniform, I feel really good about it, let's leave it. This 80,000 is not very uniform. That was our point. We wanted to make skips and these holes and these gaps, make it more realistic. Now we're moving through the season. You'll see our normal spacing there, planted at 150,000. Looks pretty good right now. You feel good about it. But when you look real close to that picture, you say, well, it looks good, the stand's good, but it's behind the other plantings. How will that affect you as the season goes on? We look here at 60,000 as they're starting to get closer to canopy. Maybe I could live with that. But ultimately, I've got to be layering in residual herbicides in these thin stands. We should be doing that in everything. But when we're dealing with a sporadic and thin stands, adding a residual with your post is going to become even more important. Now we're moving through the season. Here's another 80,000. That looks pretty good. Again, that's where our comfort level is. Now we jump to harvest time. And take a look at that replant. It's still green, it's delayed. What problems has that caused? Has it messed up my harvest schedule or my harvest plan going around the farm? Have I subjected it to frost, maybe drought, missing some rains? I've affected that opportunity of those fields. Well, here again, I look at the 40,000, it still looks thin. I mean, it's just going to look thin no matter what. Now we jump here to 80, not too bad. But you'll see the weed control is good because we layered in residuals with our post-herbicides. So how did we do? What did we learn? Well, here we're taking a look at our replant across the top, right? If we tore it up and replanted, what was our yield versus leaving what we had? So leaving an 89,000 emerged population, okay, we were $64 to the good by leaving that, 4.3 bushels. So that's a big improvement, right? No-brainer to leave that. We look at 71,000, that was still 1.1 bushels better than the replant and more profitable because we did figure in your cost of replanting here to make this realistic. Jump down to 60,000, I'm at 50, I lost $15. Okay, so 60,000, is that our number? Well, 1 year multi-location. This is still studies we need to take a harder look at. Easier way to look at this. You see on the far left, the dark green, the 135,000 emerged population, the replant, what we made. The 89,000, the 71,000, both made us more money to leave them. So is 70,000 the new number instead of 80? Well, based on 1 year data, it's starting to look that way. But I even look at this 60,000 and say, man, I'm only 14, 15 bucks behind. That's pretty close. As I think about my harvest and where I'm going, is that field going to mess me up? Do I have to come back to it? That may play in over time. We'll see as we continue to do these PFR studies, is that number actually closer to 60? Here's something else I want you to consider. And I love this picture because it tells a neat story. Over on the far right, you see the 150,000 replant. It's a thin plant, no branching, lots of distance between nodes. So to get high pod counts, we got to have a lot of plants. But as we look across and we go all the way to the far left, 40,000. And as you come across, look at those plants. Look at the branching. Look at the potential for more nodes, more pod set. The one thing we don't always count on or understand is how well plants can compensate. Soybean plants compensate so well. When you're looking at that little plant in the field, it's hard to realize that. But as the season goes on, there's a lot of compensation that goes on. So I think that's a big deal to think about as you're looking at these fields and looking at replant is, how much can I make that bean compensate? Can I help that bean compensate by my practices, some PFR proven practices with foliar feed and things like that throughout the season, that I might be better off to leave it and not replant. So again, kind of 1 year studies, we're going to keep looking at it. Now we took this a step farther because we have some areas that are strong in 30-inch row soybeans. So just like the corn, we plugged the meters, put some silicone in there, ran these to make a sporadic stand. And here's kind of what we ended up with. So again, we're looking at May 11th through the 28th, Central Illinois, Minnesota. Our emerged population was 121 in our replant, so that 48.5 bushels. Well, at 90,000 stands sporadic, if we would have left it, we were still more profitable. Now, we didn't yield as well, but we were actually more profitable because we had a cost in that replanting and the time and everything else. At 70,000, okay, we lost 3 bushel, we're down $2. We're starting to walk that line a little bit, and that's the joys of PFR to me is how do we find these break points? What works, what doesn't? We don't want everything to work, but we got to learn what works and why it works and how to make it work. So again, a little easier visual here. Far left, 121,000, 90,000, no-brainer to leave it. We get down to that 70, 71,000, we're right on that line again of what do we do? How bad is the stand? How sporadic is it? So again, we're going to continue to look at PFR studies. Your agronomists, your dealers, your seed advisors, we're going to continue to monitor this and take a look at it. Again, we look at these soybean plants when we pull them out. And the 30-inch rows, just like the 15s, the thinner the spacing gets, the more branching that we see. The more potential for nodes, the more potential for for pod set. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do. But remember, beans compensate, and they compensate well. So I'm excited about these in-season decision making. We're going to continue to expand this in PFR, add more studies. So be on the lookout. Come to Becknology Days this summer. Take a look at what we're looking at for in-season decision making. Thank you.